Benjamin Franklin said, "Lost time is never found again." Charles Darwin said, "A man who dares to waste 1 hour of time has not discovered the value of life." William Penn said, "Time is what we want most, but what we use worst." Jim Rohn said, "Time is more valuable than money. You can get more money, but you cannot get more time." Seneca, the philosopher, said, "It's not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste so much of it." Harvey Mackay said, "Time is free, but it's priceless. You can't own it, but you can use it." And Henry David Thoreau said, "You must live in the present. Launch yourself on every wave. Find your eternity in each moment." Time is one of those things that is difficult for us. About 53 days ago, we all made some New Year's resolutions. And all of a sudden, our time is gone. And maybe we've not kept those New Year's resolutions, or maybe we have, or maybe we never intended to do it in the first place. But the point is time is one of those things that is interesting. It's interesting because we all have it. We all have the same amount of it. Paul, in two different passages, one in Ephesians and one in Colossians, which both books are very similar. They're very deal with a lot of the exact same things. But in those two books, he says this: you need to redeem the time. Well, redeeming the time is something that's an even more interesting concept than just thinking about time itself. Because the word redeem lends itself to the fact that it's impossible to get time back. The word redeem has two general meanings to it. One is to buy out, and one is to buy back. Well, we can't do either with time. We cannot buy out our time. We can't pay enough to get more of it. And we can't buy it back. What's already gone has been spent. And so it's interesting that Paul chooses this particular phrase to talk about how we're supposed to view our lives and how we live them. He says, I want you to redeem the time. This gentleman, his name was Richard Rosario. Richard was accused of a crime committed in 1996 where a person's life was taken. The trial lasted about 2 years, and he was sentenced to life in prison. The whole case was not really taken as seriously as it should have been. He claimed and contended over and over again that he was over 1,000 miles away from where this crime had been committed. But he spent 20 years in prison. And Rebecca Friedman and Glenn Garber, the founders of the Exoneration Initiative, got a hold of his story and looked back over it, and they found 13 different people who were with him 1,000 miles away when this crime was committed. And after spending nearly 20 years in prison, he was found to be innocent of the crime that he was being punished for. He was released from prison and was awarded $5 million for this 20 years that he spent in prison. When he was being interviewed later, he said, "No amount of money can give me those years back." There are people in this room that completely understand that. The book of Titus chapter 2 and verse 14 give us this thought of redemption in a different phase. Jesus who gave himself for us that he might redeem us from every lawless deed and purify for himself his own special people, zealous for good works. The idea that he bought us out of this world. He redeemed us from every lawless deed and purified for himself us. He bought us out. 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 18 and 19, knowing that you were not redeemed, you were not bought out with corruptible things like silver or gold for your aimless conduct received by tradition from your fathers, but with the precious blood of Christ. So Jesus paid a price to buy us out of this world. That's one of the meanings of the word redemption. The other one that I mentioned is to buy back. And this is kind of the way this is laid out. The idea behind redemption is there was something that you owned, but you lost it. So maybe you had a subscription to a magazine. Do y'all remember what those are? Some people know what magazines are. Some people don't. Used to, you would pay a monthly or maybe even a yearly fee, and they would send you a book. Now, a book, for those you young people, are these little bitty pages that are kind of stuck together. And a magazine is just kind of a taller version with pictures in it. Okay, so you could get a subscription to a magazine, and as long as you paid the price, they would send you one of these magazines. Maybe you have a subscription to something else. You use that word just a little bit differently online. But the idea was they would send you something. Well, when your subscription ran out, they would stop sending it to you. You wouldn't get it anymore. Now, you get plenty of mail. They'd do all kind of contacting you to make sure that you went back and bought that again. They wanted you. But the point is, you had something and it has expired. You've lost it. The idea of redemption is there was something that was possessed and that possession has expired, but I wanted it back. The recovery was desired. Maybe I have this subscription I have every year, and I don't ever set on my calendar when I'm supposed to renew that subscription. And so every year I go in at the beginning of the year, January, February sometime, I'll log in and it won't let me log in. It says log in tonight and it says all this stuff. Well, anyway, I have to contact them and say, oh yeah, it's that time of year again. I want to resubscribe. And I just click the little button or whatever it is to resubscribe because I wanted it back. I want the subscription to that. I want to use it. And when I get to a point where it has expired, I immediately try to figure out how to get it back. But they're not just going to give it to you. There's a cost that is required. There's a cost that is required when trying to get that back. They're not going to say, oh, you let it elapse, no big deal. We'll just give you another year for free, unless it's like Sirius XM. They do that all the time. But there are other subscriptions that really don't do it like that. And the concept is you're paying for something, you no longer have it, and you want it back. So then, after the price has been paid, redemption has been acquired. This is the way God views us. God views us in this exact same way. When we are born as innocent children, we belong to Him. We are His. But over time and decisions and life and years and temptations and sins, we are a possession that He has lost. But He wanted us back. He wanted recovery. So a cost was required. He paid that price by God sending His Son to die for us, and that allowed for redemption to be available. That's the way the Bible usually uses this word. But now Paul is going to use this word that we see in all these other passages like that, and he's going to attach it to time. Well, you look at it from this standpoint, and that makes a lot of sense. There are times in our life where we feel like we have nothing but time. We've got all the time in the world. Sometimes we have so much time we're bored. Sometimes we have so much of it, we don't even know what to do. Sometimes we have so much time, we're not sure exactly how to spend it all. But then we look back after we've used some of that, and we look back on the things that we could have done or the way we could have spent that time, and we wish that we could have it back. But this is where this gets confusing, because you can't buy it back. You can't go backwards and start over. You can't pay to do that. And so it's hard for us to understand, what is it? What is it that Paul's trying to get in the minds of these two congregations, in that he repeated it 2 times. He's trying to point something out, that we've got to redeem the time. It's impossible to buy that back. I remember when we were moving away from the Southeast several years ago, and my dad and I had a very strained relationship. Growing up, he and I were very, very, very close. But after I moved out of the house and moved on, he and my wife, he and my mother had divorced, and he became unfaithful. And not only had he become unfaithful, he had really pulled away from me and my sister. He didn't want to have hardly anything to do with us. And it was hard to have any kind of relationship with him. You would text him or call him. He just was in a bad place in his life, and it was very difficult for him. I'm a Bible major at Freed-Hardeman during this time. I'm taking my first ministry job at this time. I'm working with the church and traveling and doing all kinds of things, and I can't have this relationship with my dad. Well, we were moving out of the Southeast, and I called him up one day. And one of the things we did growing up, I've mentioned, is we like to fish. And I called him up one day, and I said, "Look, we're leaving. We're going out of the Southeast. I'm not going to get to spend much time with you. I've not got to spend much time with you a long time. I'm coming over, and this is the days that I'm going to be there. I want you to get a boat, and I want you to borrow it from a friend, rent one, do something. You and I are going to go spend the day on the lake. I want to spend some time with you." I remember very distinctly that day, because we got out on the lake. I don't think we caught a single fish, which was normal for us. I'm just not a good fisherman. That's all there is to it, and neither was he. But we like to go out there and cast at the water. And I remember about halfway through that day, maybe it was early in the afternoon, we had been talking and laughing and cutting up and goofing off. And I remember very distinctly him saying, "I forgot how much I enjoyed you. I forgot how much I enjoyed you." Well, it wasn't much longer after that he passed away. But I had spent more time with him in that year from that time than I had the previous 5 or 6. And I think it was because both of us were trying to redeem the time. But the time had already been lost. So you can't buy this back. Paul, what are you trying to tell us? What is it that you want us to see in our lives? What is it that you're trying to challenge us with? What are you trying to motivate us with? If you're telling us, "I want you to redeem the time," well, first of all, let's look at the passage in Ephesians chapter 5. In Ephesians chapter 5, he lays this concept out. Now, you and I normally read this passage for another reason, because this is the passage that talks to us about speaking to one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. And that's probably underlined in your Bible. And so a lot of times when we study our Bibles, we kind of hurry up and read to the underlined parts, because we know that meant something to us. Or maybe if it's not underlined, it's just a part in this where you're kind of in a lull. It's not a really exciting part of the book if you're just reading through it. But he says in verse 15, "See then that you walk circumspectly." The idea is that you walk carefully. Circumspectly means, upright. But the concept is that you're standing up looking, that you're careful, that you're watching every step. He says, "See then that you walk carefully, circumspectly, not as fools." He goes, "I don't want you to be foolish, but as wise." And then he says, "Redeeming the time, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be unwise, but understand what the will of the Lord is." He says, I want you to look at your life and stop for a second. You want to be wise with money. You want to be wise in relationships. You want to be wise in all kinds of different things. Be wise with time. He says, because the days are evil. What does that mean? What does it mean the days are evil? There's been a lot of speculation, but in the greater context of the book and what's going on in Ephesus, you understand that Ephesus was a hard place to live. Ephesus was a very difficult place to be if you were a Christian. There was idolatry. And with that idolatry, there was pagan worship. And with that pagan worship, there was immorality that was heralded as religion. There were people in that city who considered what Christianity taught to be immoral as a virtue. So if they were immoral, it was a virtuous thing, and that's the context there. He told them, he said, you were once in darkness, but you've come out of darkness. In Ephesians chapter 4, if you go back just a minute, he says, I therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, beseech you to walk worthy of the calling with which you were called, with all lowliness and gentleness, with long suffering, bearing with one another in love, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. And then after that, he moves into chapter 4, verse 17. He says, this I say, therefore, and testify in the Lord, that you should no longer walk as the rest of the Gentiles walk. See, he said you got to walk circumspectly. So that's how we know this is connecting this. He says, this I say, therefore, and testify in the Lord, that you should no longer walk as the rest of the Gentiles walk, in the futility, in the uselessness of their mind, having their understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance that's in them, because of the blindness of their heart, who being past feeling, having given themselves over to lewdness, to work all uncleanness and greediness. So he said rampant, that the immorality was awful in that place. He said the Gentiles that you live among, the people that you live among, this is what they elevate in their lives. But you, verse 20, but you have not so learned Christ. That's one of my favorite verses in this entire book. But you didn't learn Jesus that way. You learned Jesus a different way. If indeed you have heard him and have been taught by him, as the truth is in Jesus, the truth, that you put off concerning your former conduct the old man which grows corrupt according to the deceitful lust, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind, that you may put on the new man which was created according to God in true righteousness and holiness. He's going to say in verse 29, and that's going to come up in a parallel passage, the book of Colossians in a minute, where he says, let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers. Verse 32, be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as God in Christ forgave you. He reminds them to walk in love. And he says, don't even allow certain things to be named among you in verse 3. He says anything that is good and positive, be a part of that. But he says do not be even partakers in anything that isn't right. And then he talks to them about light. And then he comes to this passage. See then that you walk circumspectly. He says you once walked in darkness. And you know what darkness means? Darkness was this culture that you live in, the surroundings you were in, the way people saw things, the way people did things. He says, don't get caught up in that. You've been caught up in it. Be careful with the way you move forward. Be careful with the steps that you take. Be careful with the things that you do. Be careful with the way you spend your time. Because the idea that he's given to the Ephesians and he's going to give to the Colossians is this. We've wasted a lot of time. We've wasted a lot of time doing things that were foolish. Doing things that we shouldn't have done. Doing things that we should not have been a part of. We should allow those to motivate us in the present, moving forward. We should allow that to motivate us to be more active, to be a stronger part of things, to engage, to take what we know and apply it. You see, one of the things about Christianity that's so hard is the application part, right? It's the doing what you know. A lot of people try to run around and fix things at the last moment. That's not always the best time to fix things. Sometimes the best time to fix things is as you go. And as you see problems and as you see things that need to be corrected. And so you and I live in a similar situation as the Ephesians in that our culture is corrupt and immoral. Our culture is calling things evil that are good and calling things good that are evil. And there's plenty of things on the TV, plenty of things on the news that we can get caught up in. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with resting. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with watching TV. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with keeping up with the news. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with watching. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that when we become so consumed in this world, that there'll be a day we'll look back and we wish we had consumed ourselves with something else. There'll be a time when we look back on our lives and we wished that we had consumed ourselves with something different. Now I want you to go to the Colossians passage with me for a second. Colossians chapter 4. In this passage, he uses very, very similar language. He says in chapter 4 and verse 2, continue earnestly in prayer. Be vigilant in it with thanksgiving. Meanwhile, he says, I want you to pray also for us that God would open to us a door of the word to speak the mystery of Christ, for which I'm also in my chains, that I may make it manifest as I ought to speak. Now watch verse 5. Walk in wisdom. So he says, I want you to pray. I want you to have thanksgiving. I want you to be vigilant and continue. And here's one of the things I want you to pray for. But he says, walk in wisdom towards those who are outside, redeeming the time. Let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer each one. So now Paul is using this redeeming the time in a different way. The first one, the one we read about it in the book of Ephesians, is you need to redeem the time for yourself. You need to redeem the time and consider the things that we value in our life. And that's really what we're talking about. Really what we're talking about. I don't believe that he's saying, okay, well, you need to make up for all your lost time. So when you wake up in the morning, you start praying, and if you prayed for 12 hours today, then you probably got enough in. That's unreasonable. Well, you get up and you figure out how in the world you're going to serve me all day long today, and if you haven't, then it's not a balancing act. It's a lifestyle. It's not how much good can I do over how much bad I've done. It's what do I value most in my life? What is the most important to me? He said, if you have been redeemed, then you wish you could buy back some of that time for yourself. But now he's saying to the Colossians, you've got a different point of view on this. I want you to redeem the time for others. I want you to redeem the time so that you can be helpful to the outsiders. The Bible talks about those who don't believe and the outsiders as being visitors or people who are not members of the church. Colossae had a lot of false teaching. It was different than Ephesus. Colossae had some things going on pretty well that were strong with the church. But because of a lot of the things going in their immediate culture, there was a lot of religious confusion. There was a lot of false teaching among the members of the church, those who are followers of Jesus. And he says, what I want you to do is try to figure out how to create or take advantage of opportunities, not to tell, but to influence. Not necessarily to oppose, but to help. We need a consistent movement of people who are doing the right things at the right times, things they won't regret, things they won't look back on and wish they hadn't have done. So in Colossians chapter 3, back up just a little bit. You look at verse 9, he says, do not lie to one another, since you've put off the old man with its deeds, and have put on the new man who is renewed in knowledge according to the image of him who created him. And then he says, where there is neither Greek nor Jew, nor circumcised nor uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave nor free, but Christ is all in all. He's saying, we've got to point people to Christ among this culture. We've got to do all that we can do to stop from allowing people to steal our times and take advantage of opportunities God has given us. And then you read starting at verse 12 of Colossians 3. Therefore, as the elect of God, that's how he's going to walk his way into this. Therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering, bearing with one another and forgiving one another. If anyone has a complaint against another, even as Christ forgave you, so you also must do. But above all these things, put on love, which is the bond of perfection, and let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to which also you were called in one body, and be thankful. And then he says, the part that we know about this passage, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. And then he talks about singing. And then he says, whatever you do, verse 17, and word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord Jesus. That's the context that brings him to saying, I want you to redeem the time. So in our lives, we have a responsibility for ourselves. To use the time that we have wisely, doing things that we won't regret, doing things that we're glad we're doing things that we've always meant to do. But then he's also saying that our time also needs to be redeemed for others. And I think you could rightfully apply this to our family, to our friends. I mean, I'll be honest, putting this lesson together, I almost didn't preach it because I started thinking about what I need to do. You know, I've got a son, it's a sophomore in high school. Some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. When I start doing the math, if we got here in a hurry, we don't have a whole lot longer with him. There's all these things I wanted to do, all these things. I don't know if I'm ever going to get to the things that I wanted to do. We need to make sure that we're thinking about other people in our time. And it's hard for me to even talk about that because this church is full of people who are really good at that. We need to keep it. I think about the demoniac in Mark 5, who had said for a long time, he had lived among the tombs. They tried to chain him, but he broke their chains. He howled at night. It was awful. But when Jesus came, when the demons were cast out, they found him sitting and clothed in his right mind, and he begged to be able to go with Jesus. But Jesus said, no, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go home to your friends and tell them what great things the Lord has done for you and how he has had compassion on you. That's the same thing, right? He's saying, I'm going with you. The most urgent need that I have is to be in this boat with you, Jesus, because of all the things that have happened in my life and what you've offered me. And he said, no, I don't want you to go with me. I want you to go to somebody else, and I want you to help them. Success Magazine says these are things that can help people redeem the time. Put together, some of these will be helpful and some of them will not. Put together a new playlist. Listen to a good podcast while you're driving. Learn to cook something new and share it with a friend. Or learn to cook something new with someone you love. Express appreciation to 10 people every day. Take time for your physical health. Go through a stack of papers or a drawer or a closet or a garage or a storage unit that you always meant to do. Spend more time with the people that you love. Drink more water. Think of people who've impacted your life and write a letter or call and tell them exactly how they helped you. If they're no longer with us, write the letter anyway. Find more opportunities to volunteer. Try to do something extraordinary for someone one time a week. Increase awareness of your thoughts. Schedule something you've been planned on doing. Stop trying to please everyone. Find a mentor or become one. Get a new hairstyle. Do things that increase your productivity. Go through your contacts list and text people that you've not talked to in a long time. Take a class on something you wanted to learn. Slow down or speed up. Write a to-do list and check it off. And remember the things that you enjoy doing and spend time doing them. But I think we could also add to that, say thank you more. One of the things that buys back time as quickly as anything is saying I'm sorry. It's looking at grudges that we hold and things that we don't like about others and deciding to excuse them or move forward if it's possible for us to do and right for us to do. But to mend a relationship that we always intend on mending or waiting on the other person to make the first move. Tell people, I love you because you love them. The lesson today is not about time. We talked about time quite a bit, but that's not what Paul was talking about in Ephesians and Colossians. Because you can't buy back time. It's impossible. He was saying use where you are and where you've been to motivate what you value most moving forward. And place appropriate emphasis on those things for yourself and those around you. That's what Paul's saying. He's saying, take what you know and what you intend and put those together and make them action. Apply what it is that you know and intend to do. That may start with fixing your life. It may start with fixing something, because maybe it is you spent a lot of time in the past doing things that are not right. Maybe it is that we need to spend a little time fixing things in our lives. We're told that we've spent a lot of time in the past doing things that we shouldn't do. Paul told the Romans that it's high time or it's about time that you fix those things and that you move forward being what you always intended to be. The good thing about that is there is no age limit on redeeming the time. It's just perspective and what we do with what we have. Maybe there's someone here who's not been baptized for forgiveness of your sins. Maybe you've wanted to learn about that, wanted to know. Now's a great time. Maybe you've been baptized, but you've fallen away, and you think there's going to be a time in the future where you might fix some things. I wouldn't wait. Maybe there's a correct response to this lesson is to walk out of here and reevaluate what we value most and apply those things in our life. If we can help you with any of that, please let us know how as we stand and sing this song.